As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster.
One of the worst performances of my career, and they never doubted it for a second.
We all go a little mad sometimes.
I believe there's a hero in all of us that keeps us honest, gives us strength, makes us noble.
You just gotta keep living, man. Livin.
Son of a bitch. He stole my life.
I love the smell of napalm in the morning.
Welcome back to the Shop by Shop podcast. As fans of film, all of us have, so many different filmmakers. When we ask the question of who's our favorite ones, it's always a difficult question to answer. But for me, Richard Linklater is one of those elite top 5 filmmakers in terms of the ones who've influenced me the most. And every time he comes out with a film, it's so insanely exciting. And I could not be more happy with the result of his new film, Hitman, starring Glen Powell and Adria, Arjona. And it's just a true masterclass in acting. Last year, we talked so much about the way Emma Stone evolved her character in every single tool an actor has available in Poor Things. And in this film, you really see that from both Glen Powell and Adria Arjona. And for me, both of them are absolute Oscar frontrunners. They should be, at least in my mind. But Ryan, what did you think about Richard Linklater's new film, Hitman?
Yeah, I don't know if Linklater's quite top 5 for me. He's stretching up onto that top 10 area for me, but he's made some of the best movies of all time, I think. He's got a pretty vast filmography, honestly, ranging from those big Oscar caliber movies to just family comedies that are iconic from your childhood, like School of Rock. That was one of the ones that you don't even know Linklater's made it until later in life, where you start trying to focus on the directors. But he's made so many genre blend movies, and that's exactly what Hitman is here. It's part film noir, part romance comedy. It's a film that relies on Linklater and Powell's writing as well, because he was a writing credit on this. And their performances, like you said, particularly Glen Powell and Adria Arjona, who have brilliant on-screen chemistry, providing probably the best romance plot of the year so far. Which is a big part of the movie. It's probably the whole second half. It's kind of the heart of the film, I'd say. Whilst you have Glen Powell doing this fish out of water kind of section in the first half, dressing up as different hitmen, kind of setting people up for people that are looking to usually murder their spouses. So yeah, the whole film's really interesting. It's kind of got those classic storylines of film noirs that are most notably probably the ones I think of from this is Hitchcock's Dio M for Murder, where a hitman's hired to kill his wife, or there's some hints of double indemnity here with the husband's death and the insurance payout. There's so many influences from film noir throughout this and just hitman movies in general. There's even the montage of several hitman related movies, both Dio M for Murders in there, westerns Good, the Bad and the Ugly, Martin McDonagh's In Bruges, which is another film that balances the comedy of being a hitman really well, I think. There's just the influences are all over this movie, and I think Linklater does a great job of balancing the comedy and the serious moments that are in here. I don't think it's up there in his filmography for me, but it's really, really solid.
Yeah, for me, this actually is up there in his filmography. It was a little lower on a first watch, just because for a couple reasons. There's some things I didn't love, like the look of the film. I think visually, it's definitely one of his worst. I think the lighting. We'll just get some of the criticisms out of the way, because I don't have many, but I do think the lighting's atrocious, and it has it's visually, it's not all the way there, quite as on the level of some of his other films. But I think Richard Linklater's always been a script and performance director over visuals. He's never really been a director with a distinct style visually necessarily, which is why I don't always list him in terms of my favorite, even though I think he's a great director, I don't list him as highly as one of my favorite directors, but I always say he's a top 3 favorite writer of mine, because I think for me, it really comes down to his writing. But he's also such a great director in terms of working with actors, and I think he's taken his game to a whole new level in this film. I think his work as an actor's director here is really coming full circle to a whole new level from what he's at from his filmography. And yeah, so I know some people feel like there's a debate right now over whether or not it feels like a Linklater movie, and I understand where people are coming from, because there's definitely Linklater elements that are not there. Like it doesn't deal with the passage of time. It's not dealing with a sense of place. It's set in New Orleans, but it's not really like it could be set anywhere. There's not a great sense of place in the film. And it really does have a strong plot, which is not a traditional way Linklater tells his stories. He normally plays around with structure and plot. It was just one of my favorite things about him as a filmmaker, and he really doesn't do that here. It's very straightforward, and people are saying it feels like a Netflix movie, which, to be honest, it does. It's not a movie. I think you should see every movie in the theater, but like, if you don't watch this one in the theater, it's not really going to change the film that much. Like, it's definitely a film that translates to TV based on it doesn't have a lot of cinematic qualities to it. So
I think a good crowd could maybe affect it. I only watched on Netflix, so I didn't get the chance to watch it in theaters. A good crowd could probably elevate the comedic moments. But yeah, I do get what you mean. Yeah, it does. I mean, I think it's much better quality than some of the stuff we've even been getting in theaters recently. But yeah, it does. It's not like the high quality that you'd expect. It is kind of a straight to streaming quality movie.
Yeah, I just think it doesn't really use sound or picture that much to tell the story, which are like things that are heightened by the cinematic experience. Where like script and performance based movies tend to translate well to TV better, and that's very much what this is. And I'm the biggest. Everyone knows I'm the biggest critic of these kinds of movies. Like if you prioritize the script and performance to the point of neglecting sound and picture, like I almost never enjoy those films. But I think the performances here are just that strong that I'm willing to forgive them. I also I'm very interested in psychology and stuff like that. So that subject matter, I already have a level of interest in, which definitely makes me personally a little more forgiving to some of the visual elements. But I think in terms of being a Linklater movie, I think I still very much see him in the film. Like it's still, he always deals with romance, and not just romance, but relationships where the characters have kind of time away to this imagination element to the relationships, which you really see in the Before trilogy, where there's so much time spent away from each other to kind of build imagination in their heads. And we really see that from the couple in this film as well. And also just Richard Linklater's very into psychology. Like if you watch interviews, and he's especially films like Waking Life, he really does like to explore human psychology. And I think that's why, for me, even though it doesn't have every Linklater element that we've come to expect from his films, it still very much feels like a Linklater film. But what do you think, Ryan? Did it feel like a Linklater movie to you?
Well, that's what the Before trilogy is, really. It's the psychology of relationships, pretty much going out for the whole trilogy. Yeah, there's elements here. I think he always kind of blends genres like comedy or kind of romance, like you said. So I don't know if he has a set kind of style, like you'd say, apart from the time stuff that he's always messing with. But there's a lot of films in his filmography. There's tons. I probably have only seen half of his filmography and I've got 12 watched. There's so many movies that some people don't even know about. So he's got a vast style and kind of different genres of movies that he's delved into before, but most people probably haven't seen them. So this does kind of venture away from the usual kind of films that you'd expect from him. But it does make sense once you actually get into it. It is something that you'd expect Linklater to make.
It felt like a Linklater movie. Like I said, I thought visually it was a little different, but it not different, but it just was kind of really bland and felt very kind of typical Hollywood, like a TV show almost, or a commercial.
The shallow focus really bothered me, particularly.
Yeah, I think the first 30 minutes on my first watch, I wasn't really loving it. And then I think once the relationship kicks in, that's when I really started investing in the film. But I'm sure I think I know your answer, but what do you think is better, this or the Before trilogy, in terms of the way he explores relationships?
Oh, it's got to be the Before trilogy. Do you have this above the Before trilogy?
So honestly, I think I do. I'm kind of back and forth on it. I'll say this. I like the relationship here better than the Before trilogy. I think with the Before trilogy, what I think what the Before trilogy does a lot better is the way he uses long takes in that trilogy versus the coverage approach here. I think the way we just get immersed in the long takes of the Before trilogy, it really do elevate that film. So I got to rewatch them before I give a true valid opinion on it. But I think I might be liking this one better than the Before trilogy, if I'm being honest.
Yeah. I just rewatched it, and Jesse and Celine are some of my favorite characters ever. Maybe much prefer that relationship personally. But yeah, I mean, it's a pretty different relationships in the movie. I mean, and it's a bit unfair comparing to like a trilogy worth of progression and change in a relationship, and then a bit more grounded in reality. I'd say the before trilogy. This one's a lot slapstick comedy at times. So yeah, they're pretty different.
Yeah, I agree. Like they're very different and the same. They're similar elements, but they're very different for sure. I think that yeah, I don't know. It's just I really enjoyed this one a lot personally. But of course, the Before trilogy, that's another example of a Linklater films, which defy kind of everything I prefer in cinema, where like they're not very visually interesting. They're not like they're very dialogue driven, but yet I still like they're all 4.5 or above for me. Like they're still incredible top tier films. So I think that's just another example of like I don't think that people should look at these films and be like, oh, well, that's proof you don't need to put care into visuals and audio. Like, no, I think you still should. I still think these films would be better if he kind of committed to the image a little more. But it is his writing, his work as an actor's director is that good that it's still a top quality film, even when he neglects some areas of storytelling.
Yeah,
But
I do agree that the Before trilogy doesn't like look amazing at times. Like it's just pretty basic. But I think it's still like technically impressive compared to this. There's like I think the second one there's like is it like 18-minute, 11-minute long takes and that. Like I find that really impressive. Like the kind of long take approach to the kind of dialogue kind of keeps it more fresh, kind of more interesting rather than the coverage kind of approach here. So yeah, I think that trilogy is like still pretty technically impressive at times.
yeah, honestly, you're 100% right. Like the long takes, if the start visually, even if we're just talking just the freezing the images, it's the Before
Yeah.
trilogy is 1,000 times but more better looking than Hitman. It's not even close.
Mhm.
But you're right. Technically, like the long takes of that trilogy are really so impressive from a directing standpoint. Like it's and the blocking between the two is great. So it's definitely
Mhm.
a very impressive direction in all three of those films. Absolutely. Where here the direction and the kind of the storytelling through coverage rather than long takes, I don't think does anything to elevate this film.
I feel like in the Before trilogy as well, the locations and the cities that they're in are kind of part of the story, whereas I feel like this could be like anywhere. There's not really a focus on like the location or anything like that. It's a lot of close-ups or just inside small buildings.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Like they're the Before trilogies like have every element of a Linklater movie. Like they have the romance, the imagination, they have the character driven story. They kind of have the character over plot emphasis of it, the passing of time, the
Hmm.
yeah, literally every element of a Linklater movie is the sense of place. Like it's all in the Before trilogy. Where here there's some kind of elements of Linklater, but not as deeply as that trilogy. Like that's definitely more of a reflection of him as a filmmaker than this film for sure, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
But I think we should start getting into the performances. And yes, you want to start us off? What do you think about Glen Powell, who is really establishing himself as a great actor? And I think hopefully this is going to be a big collaboration for years to come between Richard Linklater and Glen Powell.
Yeah, I love the Glenn in this. I mean, I've been loving him for ages now. He seems to be in everything right now, but Linklater discovered him kind of before he blew up, I guess. So when he was in Everybody Wants Some, so like, he's known about him. He's known his brilliance for a while, even though everybody else hasn't. But yeah, his comedic and like also acting in this, I think it's just amazing. Like the comedic moments in like the first half of the film where he dresses up as like so many different people, I think is like hilarious. Like the references, the Patrick Bateman one probably being the standout in terms of like the disguises that he makes, and it's probably my favorite. I think parts of this reminded me of like Claire's Bernie, kind of referencing to one of his other films, like where it's like all those like serious moments in the courtroom, but it still remains in that kind of like comedic side. It doesn't take like like 100% serious. There's those like goofy transitions to like where people are caught and like their mugshot flies into the screen. There's a lot of like slapstick comedic moments in the first half. To go along with Glen Powell's performance. And I think it's hard to balance that, like all these different tones. We've already seen that like being done terrible with Glen Powell. He was in Anyone But You, the comedy with Sydney Sweeney, which I thought was terrible, and that really highlights like the difference between just having these attractive people on screen and actually having like actually being like hot. Because I think that this is probably the hottest movie of the year, along with Challengers. I'm interested that I think you said it was more than Challengers. Is
Blows
that correct?
Challengers out of the water. I think. It's not even close. If I'm being honest. But you
Yeah,
mentioned
I
Anyone
think
But You. I actually met a girl like a week or two ago who said that was her favorite movie ever, and I was like,
I think Oscar liked it, but I was not a fan. That showed the bad side of. Well, Glen Powell wasn't bad, but it was not a good movie. The chemistry was not there, unlike this movie, where the chemistry between them is brilliant. But yeah, it balances that romance comedy side. It's got the hitman side as well. I think a lot of people scrolling through Netflix are going to have a very different expectations clicking on this. You know, the name Hitman, you're going to think it's going into an action movie like The Killer or The Grey Man, but it's really nothing like that. There's really no action at all, and it kind of strays away from the kind of thriller crime side that you would maybe expect going into it. So I think it's a big role for Glen Powell. He really showed that he is a star. He's got these Twisters coming up in July, I think. I think that's also going to be a big role for him. I think that's a sleeper hit. I think that's probably going to be a big summer hit. But yeah,
I agree.
he's so
I agree
good.
with
Yeah, he's got a really good double feature coming here.
Yeah, so I think when we talk about great actors, like a lot of people, I think confuse the best actor with like who's the most charismatic and who's the most likable. Which like that makes someone a great movie star. It doesn't always make them a great actor, but I think when people are just have a likable, charismatic personality, like they can get away with just playing the same character, and people will kind of just gravitate towards those actors, and they get sometimes more praise than necessarily is earned. And I think sometimes you get those rare combinations of like a Leonardo DiCaprio where you get someone who's a really like likable, charismatic guy who's also a great actor. And I think Glen Powell is showcasing that here. While the film is really directly commenting on that kind of aspect of like the movie star versus the actor, where it's kind of how Gary, the character, is a very smart character. Like he's clearly like very high intelligence, like, but at the same time, his alter ego Ron is just relies on pure instinct, and yet Ron is like the likable, charismatic guy. And I think you really see it in the first arrest scene where we have that introduction to him. He's like kind of this quirky, nerdy college professor. If you notice, he's like behind the desk. The class is like very unengaged. They're like they want to be anywhere that's not there. And then he goes, and we just see him kind of get so lost in the role. And really, this movie is kind of course, deconstructing genre of the hitman and all that, but it's very much about kind of this idea of acting in everyday life. Like you see that in a lot of Quentin Tarantino movies where the characters they're not actors, but they're in some situation where they have to put on a performance. And that's very much what this film's doing here, where we see the other two cops who are like his team in the van, and they're like super interested in him when he's playing these characters. And then in the car ride home, it's like he's giving all like these like nerd fun facts, and like they're just so uninterested in him. And he's like back to being Gary. But it's kind of like the thing where it's like you have an actor who plays a hitman in a movie, and they're like super interested. Like everyone watching at home is like, I want to be this guy. I want to hang out with this guy. And then sometimes the real person is like obviously they've never killed anyone 99% of the time, I would assume. And they sometimes might not be as interesting of a human being off camera. And I think it really plays around with that idea. And I think Glen Powell just captures that so perfectly, how many personas he portrays, where we take a movie like The Batman, which is one of my all-time favorite movies ever. What we're seeing there is that a character arc about the character's decisions, which is what a lot of movies do, where the decision of the character is evolving. Like he goes from being like more isolated, like doing it for his own personal kind of motivations, to okay, I need to be a better role model for the city and all that stuff. So that's the character arc of the Batman, which I'm just giving you an example. So many films do this. It's not a criticism of that film, it's just something they do differently from this film, where this is a film where not only the character is evolving in terms of decisions they make, but it's a full psychological evolution of the character. We're seeing his psychology change. We're seeing the way he speaks change. We're seeing the way he moves his body and his body language change. If you notice in the earlier scenes where he's Gary, he's very kind of like hunched in his shoulders, and then by the end he's a lot more lean back. And I think that he uses also just the way he speaks. Like he speaks, there's more pauses in his dialogue when he's Ron versus when he's Gary. He speaks a little more constant, a little more rapid fire, and just the way he evolves, not just from between Gary and Ron, but all these other fun side characters we see, like just the speech, the body movement, the speed of he's delivering the lines, the volume he is, and just every scene from both Powell and Arjona, it's really just such an kind of evolution to the way they speak. And there's every scene they're speaking in a different way. The tone of their voice is different. The volume's changing. The way they're moving their bodies is changing. Like there's just such evolution to the acting in this film, which is why I'm just so caught up in studying the acting of this film that it lets me forgive some of the other flaws of the film, like the visuals and the lighting and all that stuff we've already mentioned.
I just thought it was really impressive how not only the performance was really good, but like we've seen in the past, like with Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy, they have writing credits on like the screenplay for the film. I think it's just really impressive that I think Glen Powell actually kind of approached Linklater for this, because he had discovered the newspaper article, and then Linklater had remembered like 20 years ago reading it. So yeah, it's just really interesting to see like the kind of up and coming actors, like how many of them are getting involved with like the actual production of the film. So yeah, I think that's another aspect of why he just really is going to be like the next big star.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think he's I feel like from the films at least I've seen from him, maybe some people have seen more of his work than I have, but he's definitely like gave me like he seemed like he was like a movie star. Like when you see him in like Top Gun Maverick or Everybody Wants Some, he's a very charismatic guy. He's like, and he just seems
free.
of course, the masterpiece that is Spy Kids 3. But he's very charismatic. He's like, and he has like the movie star kind of charm to him. But this is the first time I've really seen like true like range and evolution to his acting. And maybe he's done stuff like this in other work that I haven't seen, but I think he really is establishing himself as a serious, like possibly like another DiCaprio, like someone who has the kind of likability of a movie star, but also wants to do serious roles, wants to really challenge himself. And because of that, could get a lot of, really great films made and some really interesting roles in the future. So I hope I think the future is very bright for him, and I'm looking forward to it. And I think as of right now, he's the front runner for best leading actor. I don't know. Who do you have at the top of your list right now? But for me, he's easily.
Who do I? Timmy, maybe. Although I don't think.
Yeah,
am I missing anybody else? I don't think there's really any actors that stand out to me other than those two. Let me just double check.
Yeah, pretty much all my lists this year are like Dune and at the top of like everything, and then this for performance categories.
I really liked. I don't think this should be like a sporting actor, but Gabriel LaBelle in Snack Shack. That was like a straight to streaming movie. I think he is another one that is he should already be like the next movie star after The Fabelmans, because he should have got an acting nomination for that one. He was amazing in that movie, and he was also amazing in this. But yeah, nobody's really seen that movie because it was just dumped on streaming. But yeah, I don't really have any other like standout best actor roles right now. Glen Powell really is one of the best of the year.
Yeah, I totally agree. So I think now is probably, I think we should talk a bit about Linklater's writing before we get into Madison, because there's just so much to break down with her character and that relationship. But I love how in terms of his writing, he's a big fan of Alfred Hitchcock, and I feel like we see that Hitchcock influence so much here. With he's so many other people would like when it's revealed when the secret eventually comes out to Madison, like so many people would play that as a plot twist or something like that, where he really is giving us information the whole film. Like, there's no plot twist here. Everything that characters might make decisions that we don't expect them to make, but there's no real information that's held back from us. He takes the Hitchcock approach of like always giving us information, and we're always an insider in this movie. Like, we're always inside on everything, and there's kind of like the irony and the dread of like when people are going to find things out, because like we've all watched movies before. Everyone knows the secret's going to come out. She's obviously going to find out. He's going to be in some form of conflict with his job because he's doing things he shouldn't be doing in terms of the police protocol. But so we know it's all going to come out, and there's like this dread and irony that a lot of it comes from really investing in the relationship. And I think it's kind of almost like a superhero movie where like he has this secret identity, and it's like
Clark Kent where he puts his glasses on.
Honestly, that's a great comparison. Honestly, really is. And by the second half, it's like there's just it's like he's caught in a trap with like so much like high dramatic conflict, and I just love the way he really makes us like an insider on all of this. We should probably get into the other superstar of this film, which is Adria Arjona playing the character of Madison. So why don't you start us off? What are your thoughts on Madison's character as a whole and the performance?
Yeah, I mean, she was also great. Just the chemistry between the two was outstanding. Like I was saying earlier, there's a lot of instances just this year where the two leads don't really have great chemistry, even with Glen Powell. So it really is like a testament to how good she really is. I didn't know who she was before seeing this, so hopefully she has a chance of also becoming like an next big star. I feel like this is like one of those movies where like it does kind of like set people up to really like a jump off point to really go on and have a great career. Hopefully it's a popular film like that. Yeah, she's also great in the comedic moments. I think she works well as the kind of like femme fatale kind of point in like a film noir where she's kind of like drawing him in. It doesn't really lead to the usual like side that you would see with that usually in the tropes of those movies where like she'd end up like backstabbing him or something. But I think like her kind of luring him in, bringing out his different personalities and stuff, kind of leading down that thriller side to the bodies and stuff, or killing people, is interesting. I mean, I feel like the probably appropriate route, considering that she was like doing all that, and like tried to kill her boyfriend, would have been maybe that she would have ended up tricking him and maybe running off with the money. But like the ending really surprised me, honestly. Like kind of happily ever after ending where they just kind of end up loving each other and it's all fine. I'm not 100% sure if that was. If I'm 100% sure with that ending, it's a bit too clean. But yeah, what did you think about that? It was kind of a subversion of expectations, personally.
Yeah, so I actually thought that the whole time on a first watch, I thought Madison was playing him. I thought maybe she was like working for the dude Jasper. Like I wasn't sure. Like I thought I'll put it this way, like because we've seen him conning all these people all film. So I'm like, okay, it's only a matter of time before someone cons him. So I thought like, okay, like who is like, is this like a big plan? Like I thought someone who he like fooled in one of those arrests was trying to get revenge on him. So I thought for sure. In terms of the ending, like I don't think the ending scene in terms of the final scene, not the final scene, the scene where they kill Jasper. That scene, I thought that it wasn't the best scene, but it was. Yeah, I don't know. It wasn't my favorite scene of the film. I'll leave it at that. But overall, like I think the ending, it was kind of like I think it was more about the irony underneath of it, of like, oh, it's this happy American family, but really it's like, and how it's like everyone who passes off as normal, kind of because, like I said, there's really a lot it's exploring about human psychology and how people have dark ideas and imaginations, and like people will watch like darker movies and like really the way some people get invested or picture themselves in some of these darker situations are. Because I said also like those other cops he's with are like the audience of a sitcom and like stand-ins for everything is like a stand-in for a movie essentially, and it's kind of how it's like even the most normal seeming people have like kind of darker ideas beneath the surface, and it's like they just killed this dude and now it's this nice happy family, and it's like the kind of mask of normality. So I did like the very ending. it was the final scene before the time jump that I didn't. I mean, it was just the execution there. I guess I didn't love as much, but
I feel like usually they would either die or go to prison, so it was an interesting kind of switch up from what I was expecting what was going to happen. I didn't expect it to end at that point in the film. Yeah, I know. It kind of felt the fade to black kind of felt like maybe there could have been like multiple endings to the movie, and like that's what they picked. I'm not sure if like that was the case or if they really just were going for that the whole time. But yeah, it was. I mean, it was nice to just have a happy ending. Maybe it's a bit better for the Netflix movie. I don't know if they would have had any. Oh well, no, they just distributed it, so they wouldn't have had any say. But it's a nicer ending. I'm interested to see like how people react to that kind of ending.
yeah, and yeah. So I think backtracking a bit, I think that the scene where what's his name, where Gary or technically Ronnie is in the moment meets Madison, I think was
Mhm.
just such a well executed scene, and I think so much about the film really kind of hinges on the execution of it, where they kind of create like this like dreary atmosphere with like it's very dull, it's like really smoky, but the smoke also kind of isolates them in this booth, and we've seen so many of these arrests by now, but because they're kind of part of a montage, it kind of devalues the importance of a lot of these arrests. So the fact that like now they're it's not part of a montage, I think really just it makes say, okay, well now this we just subconsciously know it's going to be important, even if we don't aren't
Mhm.
sure why. I think most people pick up early on and say, okay, these characters are going to have some form of relationship just by the way it stands out from the other arrests that we've seen and just tonally. And I think there's so many subtle things they kind of do here to kind of because obviously we know what his objective is and the way he's kind of thrown off from that objective. Both of them are thrown off from their objectives. I think it's done so subtly and brilliantly where, she's like really like a sad person when she enters that scene. And then slowly, like she sees the cat. And like if you notice, like her shoulders really kind of jolt forward with like genuine subconscious interest. Like it feels like Arjona is always really relying on her, both of them especially, but she's really kind of relying on her subconscious here. It never feels like either of these actors are thinking about their actions or any kind of a calculated way. It feels like they're just really relying on subconscious instinct, which is why I think they feel like such genuine performances here. And like the first kind of story beat that I really picked up on is she sees the cat and like leans forward, and just like that kind of element of the atmosphere really does just elevate her mood from like the sadness that she enters it with. It kind of puts her in a bit of a better state of mind. And then the dog versus cat conversation. And then that kind of just gives them something to just get lost in the dialogue between each other, which of course is a staple of Linklater films, as characters just kind of getting lost in the dialogue with each other. And now it's like the way so what Linklater does so well with his blocking is the way he uses space between the two, where it's like first they're kind of there's a booth at a restaurant is obviously already a tight space, but the way he then kind of makes the space between them even tighter as as interest builds between both of them. And at first, Glen Powell's a little more keeping his shoulders back and in the beginning. And then as he kind of has more pauses, like I said, more pauses in his dialogue, Linklater has such great, like even though the dialogue's great, the pauses in the dialogue are some of the biggest strengths to creating the tension in the romance of this film. And then when both of them kind of have their shoulders leaned in, that's when like, okay, now they're both really using their imagination. He really builds relationships through imagination in his films between two characters, and now they're kind of giving scenarios with each other, and it's doing kind of like they're both kind of creating an imagination both together rather than on their own now.
Mhm.
Really move the relationship forward, and just starting from that action of seeing the cat shows like, okay, like she's someone with a heart, like she's not a heartless person. And that's I think where the kind of guilt builds to, okay, like I don't want to get her arrested. And then from there, he kind of leaves with that final line of like, okay, well, you have my number. But also, actually, another thing is that's interesting is because I'm such a big advocate for music in film. But it's interesting here how 9 out of 10 directors, if they were to use music in this scene, would use it to create the tension between them and create that romantic tension. And instead, he uses it for the opposite. He uses the music to instead break that tension when she gets the phone buzz from I think his name Mike, I believe his name was her husband, And it just that the music instead used to kind of break the tension. And also like even little things like the pie, where it's like that kind of moves the relationship forward too, because for her, like she says that he has her on, I think like a diet or some type of meal plan or something. And because of that, just the small action of being able to eat that pie just seems like such a freeing action for her. It makes her
Mhm.
be able to feel more free with Ron than she does with her husband. And just so many subtle things Linklater does to really evolve that scene and make it so effective, I think are brilliant.
It really felt like Linklater writing in that scene when, when they joke about the cat killing their kind of owners or whatever it was. That felt like a conversation that Celine and Jesse would have in like before midnight or sunrise. Like they always have like those kind of like jokey scenarios where they're kind of acting as two different people and like joking about it. I really love when like Linklater does that, and like I don't know, it just creates like this really like nice kind of like relationship between them. That was one of the moments that I really noticed from that scene.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's just so Linklater. Like you said, the scenarios
Yeah.
I think are such a big part of it. But yeah, I think Arjona, like there's just such genuine like interest in her eyes. Like I said, like she just seems like such a
Hmm.
sad person and like defeated. She has like this defeated energy to her when she enters that restaurant or bar, whatever you want to call it. And like we just see like the interest spark in her eyes, and it feels very genuine. Like it feels like I said, I keep saying reusing this word, but the imagination in the minds of the characters that is a staple of Linklater. And then we go to like then they have that dog park scene, and it's like the irony then under it, like kind of like the ending of like they literally just had a conversation about getting her husband murdered, and now you're on a date with a woman who is capable of hiring someone to murder her husband, and you're on a date with someone who you believe murders people for money, and it's like the most normal happy couple. He's throwing football with the kids, she's playing with the dogs, and it's just this kind of once again the mask of normality when there really is like such darker elements to everyone's psychology that Linklater plays with. I really enjoyed. And then we have that scene of them at the bar, and like once again the way Linklater kind of closes the gaps between them and uses really strong pauses in the dialogue where first her head's kind of down and she's looking up at him, and you can just see like so much thought behind her eyes. It's like I said, because she's had time now, there's been some time away, and like she just saw him throwing footballs with kids, and she's thinking like, wait, this guy kills people for money, and she's just like, there's no way you're a hitman. And the way once again, because like I said, in the before trilogy, there's that time apart from each other, and that really builds this imagination and ideas about each other between the films, or really between the first two. But and then the what's it called? In here, it's the same thing. Like he says, like they don't contact each other frequently, and because of that, so much imagination and like excitement of the relationship build. Just like another example, if you see a movie that when we see Dune 2, there was so much excitement and anticipation going into it, whereas now it's like we can watch it any day. It doesn't have that same level of excitement anymore, and that he really uses that with the relationship here to such a strength. And Arjona's eyes really create that, where there's just so much true interest behind them and like genuine emotion. And I think that's just part of like we always talk about individual performances, but I think really good acting is a collective thing. And it's when just that chemistry's right and there's just that synchronization between the actors, I think is just really creates something special. And I think that's what they do here is really create just such the way both of them are just I guess I keep saying this. I feel like I'm getting repetitive, but like just relying on their subconscious is why the relationship for me feels so genuine.
Yeah, I really like that he does kind of isolate it to what's just their apartment or her apartment building for most of it.
Mhm.
It's kind of like that their own like little location where he becomes drawn, and that's where his like personality starts to like develop outside of it even. So yeah, I like how it's kind of limited to just that like one location until later on in the film where it kind of spreads out and these personalities kind of collide together.
Yeah, and then also we see so first it starts we see Gary bleed into Ron, where
Hmm.
like I said, like he goes from being behind the desk in front of the desk. Like first we see Gary bleeding into Ron, where uh like stuff like she pulls the gun out and the way he reacts to it, like his fear bleeds out
Yeah.
through, like when they're walking to the nightclub and she's like talking about a full moon and he starts giving like this whole science lecture where like if he had said that on the first meeting, there would have been no second date or anything like that. But because now she's already so invested in him, she's willing to listen to the science that has bored everyone else. And even like just his delivery is a lot better than it would have been. But you see Gary bleeding into Ron. But then throughout the film, we see Ron instead start bleeding into Gary, where like he's giving the lecture and now he's standing in front of the desk and he's really engaging with his students and stuff like that. So I think the bleed through between the alter egos is another really interesting evolution to the film.
Yeah, I think one of the most impressive moments with that was at the moment where she finds out that he has been lying about being a hitman, and it's so weird, like the just small intricacies that Glen Powell brings into it. Like as you can see Gary like panicking, kind of turning back into him. Like even his appearance starts to look like Gary, even within like a moment's change. I really find like the whole kind of like identity commentary really interesting in this because like I've seen the Linklater listen to like a lot of tapes of like the actual undercover like scenarios to kind of help him write the script, and you kind of realize like people kind of sounded like they were in movies like in these scenarios where like they were meeting with the hitmen, and the lectures that he has throughout this are kind of like really interesting additions in the film. I think like where he's like discussing identity, the self, like what it really means to be all that, and like how you can like change your personality. And then it actually happens throughout the whole film with that Gary and Ron kind of blending. And yeah, it's when you like you were saying, like you see like Gary like slowly progress in the film as he pretends to be those hitmen, then he begins to realize the potential of what he could do in like his personal life. And it's really like that, like saying like, well, like if you behave as the person you want to be, and eventually that'll be who you be. So it's really interesting to see how like the Gary and Ron personalities blend throughout the film. There's that lecture where he has like on the blackboard behind him, like it's like the id, the desires, the primitive instincts, urges. It's kind of like the Ron, his alter ego, the hitman that he uses to go and sleep with Madison. Like that's where like his urges and stuff in that like location at her house. The super ego, the conscious, that kind of awards you for behaving normally. That's he's Gary, the logical side of the guy that kind of plays it safe. And then the ego, the middleman, the kind of instinct and logic, law and lawless that blends the Gary and Ron like together, especially as like the film progresses. I think he uses Ron in his work life, kind of sticking up for him in the courtroom. Because he's kind of getting interrogated for like the woman's interrogating him, saying that it's kind of wrong what he's been doing in his career, but he starts to like think like what would Ron do, and he like gets back at the woman, like shuts her up. So there's like both sides of his life that they kind of blend together. Another one of his things in the classes I really liked was like when they discussed the way that they should like lawfully deal with someone on trial, and the kind of primitive society decide that they should just kill the guy, the outsider, and in the sake of their survival. I think that was like some nice foreshadowing to the end of the film where they decide to kill Jasper to kind of save their own their lives.
And how he's like a problem to everyone. Like he's not just a problem for them; he's a problem for the police department. In the beginning, they're like, "We're trying to hide the face," and it's like, you know what? He's a problem for everyone. Like, let's just kill him. And it's like the mask of normality. It's like, society's great. Like, because like he doesn't kill anyone. Like he's obviously not like, it doesn't seem like he's probably not a very good dude. But like
he beat up some kids or something. Do they not? That's why he's suspended at the start of the movie.
Wait, he didn't kill someone. I thought he just beat up a bunch of
No, he beat up some kids, I think it was. There was a video of it or something.
So it's like, is that an action that warrants murder? I don't know, but it's like, everyone who's a problem, let's just kill the guy. Like it's fun, like kind of satire comedy. But yeah, I think I can't wait to start talking about the psychology part of the film, because for me, I'm a psychology nut. Like I love to study it and learn about it, and that's one of the most interesting parts of the film for me. But before we get into that, let's go into our intermission. So to start us off, why don't we start off with the Q&A? If it's your first time watching, we have a link in the description below where you can ask us questions, be featured on this intermission section. You can ask us questions about literally whatever. And we don't always get to every question every episode, but if your questions do not get answered, no worries. It will be answered on a future episode. So our first question is from Ferdinand. Who is winning the 2024 Euros? And for anyone who doesn't know what that is a soccer championship.
Not England.
Uh,
I don't know if are you rooting for Italy, I guess?
I was about to say, is the only team I have any investment is Italy, so I'm pulling for Italy all the way.
You just root against England. You can join me in that because Scotland will not be doing very well in this. Scotland probably won't even score a goal. So I'll just be hating on England for the rest of the tournament.
I did watch the full game when it went into overtime when Italy beat England. That was a fun. That was a fun game.
That was a good game, yeah.
All right, next question from Cash the Butcher. Are you fond of me lobster? Fuck your lobster, Cash. That's what you get for giving Hitman 3 stars. Fuck your lobster.
Yeah. He's based for like in the Lighthouse at least, though.
That is true. Are you fond of his lobster?
Yeah, I'm definitely fond of Cash's lobster. Yeah.
All right. Next, we have question from Will. What is a film that you weren't a big fan of initially, but ended up growing on you? It's a good question. That's a Letterboxd consult question.
The one that comes to mind, I was fond of it. This was before I got like majorly into film, but the first Tarantino I seen was Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and it wasn't that I disliked it, it just wasn't what I expected going into it, because I think that, yeah, at the time I hadn't seen a Tarantino. I just knew it was DiCaprio and Margot Robbie. So I thought it was going to be like Wolf of Wall Street, which is nothing like it. So it was not what I expected, and it's now like in my top 10 films of all time. So it's probably the one that's changed a lot, I think. But I never disliked it.
For me, there's a lot that like I watched and like I thought they were good, but like then when I saw them in theaters, I was like, wow, no, this is a great movie. The first one that comes into my mind is Chinatown. That was one I was like, it's a good movie. I think I gave it like a 4 stars. Like I didn't really have any I wasn't dying to watch it again. But when I saw it in theaters with like the jazz score in the theater, I was like, dude, this is one of my favorite movies ever. That's the first one off the top of my head. I'm consulting Letterboxd. Treasure of the Sierra Madre, another one. It was like good movie, very good movie. Like I liked it a lot, but like it became one of my favorite movies the second time I watched it in theaters.
Yeah, that's a great film. I feel like Chinatown, that could happen to me as well. I've got it as a 4 right now.
Oh yeah,
I don't think it's like an all-timer or anything, but
yeah, definitely. What else do I got? The
Vertigo, maybe I could say. I think I gave that a 3.5 when I first watched it. Now I think it's like S tier Hitchcock. But it wasn't one I ever disliked or anything.
That's such a 2-watch movie. Like that's one I feel like. So
yeah, exactly.
On a second, honestly, I guarantee that'll be 8.5 for you when you watch that a second time.
Yeah, I think so. There's a lot of classics. I feel like that happens. I feel like that'll happen with me. What was it? Casablanca. I feel like that might happen as well.
Yeah, The Graduate. That's one I didn't like on a first watch. Like I really.
Oh yeah.
Like I actually gave that a low score, and when I saw that,
yeah, you did. You had it really low.
No, yeah, I had it like a 2.5. Yeah, I didn't connect with it at all. That was like before I'd really studied film though, when I watched it. So like on a personal level, I didn't connect with it as much. But like now, like I have it a 5 now. Like I really grew an appreciation for that on a rewatch. In the Mood for Love, I didn't consider arguably the greatest movie of all time on a first watch. I still think I think I gave it a 4.5 on a first watch, and then the second watch, I'm like, this is maybe the greatest movie ever made.
Yeah, I don't know if I have any other ones that stand out like that.
Question from Young Sam: do you think Hitman is Linklater's most accessible film? That's an interesting question.
No, because School of Rock is available or accessible for like kids as well. So I'd probably go for that.
I would also say no. I think the fact that it's one of Netflix movies, some people are going to kind of group it in with the ones that aren't they're not going to take it as seriously. So I think that's just one thing right away. I agree. I think School of Rock has got to be his most accessible film. And I think that, yeah, I don't know. It's because I could see there being regular like, non-movie fans who like the Before trilogy better. And I could also see non-movie fans liking this better. So I don't really know, but I would say, yeah, I mean, I definitely wouldn't call it his most accessible. Like his most accessible, I think, is definitely School of Rock.
Yeah, I'd probably go like Dazed and Confused as he's least accessible. Because a lot of people just say that doesn't have a plot and it's boring. Uh,
Yeah, it's so accessible to some like non-movie fans because like they just find the high school element so relatable and fun and like love the
yeah,
characters.
I guess.
But like it's such a love it or hate it film, honestly. Like because people like I think there's a lot. I'll put it this way: it's not like love it or hate it. Like you need to be a movie fan or like someone with a knowledge of cinema to love it. But like it really
Yeah,
all comes down to do you prefer character or do you prefer plot? And I think people who prefer character generally really respond to it. Where I think people who really are movies are all about the plot and the conflicts for them don't respond to it as well because it's not a conflict driven film. All right, final question from Anonymous. Which genre is the most versatile? I mean, it's got to be drama.
I mean that's cheating though.
Uh,
Everything else
you know,
drama.
I agree because I don't think drama is
Um,
really a genre. I think it's the absence of.
yeah. Well, I think that sometimes, but then there's like movies that you can only describe as like drama. Like I feel like it maybe describe like Parasite as a drama primarily,
Yeah,
and
but it
then like
also
a
has comedic
thriller as like a
moments. It has thriller moments.
yeah.
It has
It's so
some
hard because like
are like
they're always blend of genres.
this is why I hate genre and I never think in terms of genre unless like certain films are definitely like commenting on genre, but I think we always force genre onto film when it does we don't need to. But
Yeah, true, maybe.
I would
Um,
say honestly crime. And I say that because crime's not an emotion, it's a subject matter. So because of that, you can go through so many emotions. It's off the top of my head I'm gonna go with. Yeah, I don't know.
Coming of age. You
Oh,
kind of
honestly,
squeeze
yeah,
that into
coming of
like.
age.
'Cause I
That
feel like Hitman's kind of a coming of age, like like a non. It's kind of like an older version, opposed to what you usually have.
That's interesting. I didn't think about it that way. That's an interesting take.
Yeah. So you can
All right.
fit it into a lot of different stuff.
All right. So that is five for the day. If your question did not get answered, we will make sure to answer it on the next episode. And drop if you have another question, just drop it in the link in the description below. But let's get into our top 5 watches. So Ryan, why don't you start us off? What are your top 5 watches since the last episode?
Cool. Yeah, my number 5 is Falcon Lake. This is like a French Canadian movie, which it was at a couple of festivals and just didn't really get distribution properly. So it's from last year, I think, or like 2022. Came out digitally last year, but nobody's really seen it. It's on the Criterion channel if you have that. But yeah, this is a beautiful film. It's shot in 16mm. So yeah, it's in Canada. It's just a coming of age film. I don't really want to spoil what it's about, but yeah, it's a really good looking movie. Number 4 is Everybody Wants Some. I've been on a Linklater rewatch binge recently. And honestly, after first watch, I did not think Everybody Wants Some was like kind of like top half Linklater. I kind of had it towards the bottom, but after this rewatch, I think it is maybe like my 4th or 5th Linklater. I mean, it's like a nice like companion piece to Dazed and Confused, kind of like that like college version of it. So yeah, I really love it. And Glen Powell, again, he's amazing in that. So I think that's definitely something that gets better on rewatch. Number 3, Dazed and Confused, another rewatch. I think it was like a year ago now. We watched it together. It was my first time, and yeah, I loved it. Yeah, probably the best soundtrack of all time. Um, I feel like maybe Everybody Wants Some's maybe a bit more relatable to me at least, like the college experience, opposed to the high school, just personally. But I can see why a lot of people relate to that. I feel like it's probably more like a US thing, but it's still such it's a great story. Oh, not really story. It's a great character piece. I really like Ben Affleck in that one, particularly in this rewatch. And then when he breaks his ankle and just keeps going, I noticed that this watch. There's just so many good characters in this. But that's still like probably my 2 or 3 Linklater. I'm not sure. And then number 2, I have Before Sunrise, which is my number 1 Linklater. probably like top 5 trilogies of all time. I'd say the Before trilogy for me, and this is definitely the best. I feel like that's where we're talking about how they aren't like the most visually stylistic movies from Linklater. I think this one like looks really good. Probably because it's from the 90s. It just has like that different kind of style and the costumes and how everybody dressed and looked. I really prefer it. And what city again are they in the first one? Is it Venice?
It was either I want to say Paris, but
No, it's not Paris. Paris is the second one.
Paris is the second one. I think then it's Venice or Vienna.
Vienna, yeah, maybe Vienna. Yeah, Vienna just looks so good in the first one. Yeah, I feel like I mean, the second one, it's all like in time, so it's like an hour and a half of like them talking, and it's mostly one shot or long shots. So yeah, I just prefer one a little bit more to the Before Sunset. Personally, what is your favorite from the trilogy?
Sunrise. It's the only one I've rewatched is Sunrise. So Sunrise definitely for me. But
Well, you've never rewatched the other ones.
no, I haven't. I
Hmm.
I forget. I think I was busy. They rescreened the entire trilogy, but I was busy that weekend, so I was only able to see Sunrise again. But yeah, I need to rewatch the whole trilogy because I did really enjoy it.
Mhm. And then my number one is a rewatch in theaters. It was Lord of the Rings: The Fellowship of the Ring.
Yeah. Luckily, I didn't sleep much this week, which means I did not watch Lord of the Rings. All right, so my top 5 watches. I've been at Tribeca all week, so I wasn't on the last episode, so this is 2 weeks for me. But
Mhm.
yeah, so honorable mentions. I'll shout out from the Tribeca Film Festival. Film called Bitter Root. This was about the Hmong communities in Montana. That was a very interesting meditative film. Also, very interesting meditative film I watched. This was a Chinese film called Some Rain Must Fall. Those are both, if you like more slow burn, beautiful to look at meditative films, they were both very interesting. I enjoyed both of those. But now to my top 5 watches. Number 5, War of the Planet of the Apes. I've been procrastinating finishing that trilogy for a while. Finally finished it. This is by far the best one of that trilogy. This is the one I understand the praise for. The other two are like good, not great in my opinion. This one I thought was really well done. I understand why they let Reeves do what he did with the Batman after that one. Very good.
What did you give it?
I give it a 4.5.
Okay.
Number 4, also at a 4.5, we have Fathom Events rescreening the ultimate masterpiece from the 70s, the Muppets movie. Still a banger. Then we have at number 3, we have a film from the greatest musical director of all time, not even close. Busby Berkeley's The Gang's All Here, his first movie in color. Obviously, the story itself is kind of whatever and forgettable, but the musical numbers are truly some of the greatest cinema you'll ever see. His color coordination and color palette are just simply on another level. Number 2, Spike Lee's He Got Game. Great basketball film, great sports film, a lot of heart to it. It's so Spike Lee. It's got such love for the sport, and it's a great movie. That's a 5-star for me. Love that film. Then number 1, rewatching a film that actually talk about films that went up for me on a rewatch. This film was like a low 4.5 for me when I saw it at the Philly Film Festival last year. Really liked it. Really liked the filmmaker, but on a rewatch, I was like, this is a true masterpiece. My number 2 2024 release, and it's just incredible. I can't wait to rewatch it, and that is Ryusuke Hamaguchi's Evil Does Not Exist.
Oh, I still need to watch that.
It's so good. It's another very like slow meditative film, but the ideas are so deep, and the way it really communicates the ideas and the questions that the film wants to ask are just it's a beautiful film with a great score as well. So
Did you up it to a 5? Yeah.
oh yeah, that's easy 5 now. I think it would really take a lot for a film to dethrone my 1 and 2 right now. There's like maybe
Yeah.
films yet to be released that have the chance at doing it, but because I know Paolo Sorrentino's doing a film, we have Megalopolis coming out, and Nosferatu from Robert Eggers. Then, of course, the masterpiece Sonic the Hedgehog 3. But aside from that, I don't see anything. I think I'd be very surprised if anything were to crack into that top 2.
Mm-hmm.
But my number 3 on the year is the film we've been talking about, which is Richard Linklater's Hitman. Where do you have it ranked?
4. I have it, I think.
What do you have?
Let me just double check that. Let me just double check. Get my list up here. I know I have Dune at 1. Challenges at 2. Fury. Oh no, it's at 5. Sorry. Furiosa at 3. The Beast at 4. I know you've not seen that. And Hitman at 5.
Yeah. All right, let's get back into Hitman and talk about for me, the most exciting part of the film, which is the way it explores human psychology. And like I said, these characters are really evolving the psychology of their characters in every scene. And like I said, in the beginning, Gary is such a calculated, like, intelligent guy. And then when he becomes Ron, he really becomes someone who's not thinking with his conscious mind, but thinking with his subconscious instinct. And I will say I do a bit of criticism is how easy it becomes for him to play these characters. Like, it's not that easy to just change your personality completely like that. And like actors who are able to pull this off, like, spend years training and like can't pull off this many just like that. But like, it's basically skipping over the boring part of the practice, which of course is not.
Well, that's where like the kind of slapstick comedy comes in.
That's so.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's I think that the way it really, and that's why I think it's such a strength of performances, is that it feels like both of them are relying on the subconscious, where like a lot of bad acting, there's like overemphasis on lines, and it feels like they're trying to be something where these characters are just inhabiting, and it's like they're reacting one actor off of another, and they're reacting like with real like emotional reactions and just kind of thinking on instinct, like real human beings do in a lot of interactions. Obviously, if you're watching a film like The Godfather, like those are settings of characters who are thinking very calculated and are not relying on instinct. But for a more relationship driven film like this, especially this kind of honeymoon phase of like a new relationship, it's very instinct driven and just about this like innate human connection. And I think that part of the psychology and how he evolves his behavior into becoming a better version of himself. And like I said, these characters are moving and speaking differently in nearly every scene. And I think it really kind of sets the tone right away, where we see in that first arrest where it's like he's thinking calculated. He has a motivation. He wants to get the guy to say that he wants to hire him to kill someone for money. And then Richard Linklater, this is one moment of visual storytelling he does use, where he cuts out to a shot through a fish tank, and there's like in the foreground, there's bubbles up over Gary. And this is the moment where now his subconscious and his instincts are now taking over, to the point of now he's just so excited and just lost in the role that he's not really in a calculated way trying to be someone who he's not. He's just, his subconscious has taken over here completely. He's thinking on the spot. He's listening to the person he's talking to and like really reacting off of them, rather than like a scripted playbook necessarily. And this is where I think then we just keep seeing him get so consumed in the role, just like an actor, just this love of like playing characters and like learning about different people and just crafting their character. And we see all of that. We see, of course, the sitcom audience of the other cops be like, who are a little on the nose sometimes, the dialogue, but like they're now everyone's just more interested in him as these characters then, because this is before Ron becomes a character, than it is as Gary. And just, we see the like I keep saying, the imagination, like he's using his imagination while he's playing these characters. And I think it's like, then it's like you see things like this, like the way the first guy stares at him and he runs away from the discomfort, where later he becomes a lot more like open to confrontation and more comfortable in those situations. And just his whole psychology, like that's not something like him running away. That was an instinct. That wasn't a calculated thing. The same way that when he pulls the gun on the Mike, the ex-husband or husband, whatever, it's an instinct reaction. It's not a calculated thing that he does. He's just relying on instinct. And the way he starts to kind of, we see his instinctual psychology, not in a calculated way, but the way his instincts evolve with the psychology of like the id ego and the super ego that he talks about, and really going from being someone who thinks with the conscious mind to someone who thinks with the unconscious mind is one of the most interesting parts of the film for me. And Arjona as well, like she plays multiple characters throughout the film. Like we see when he walks in and she's got like the airline, the flight attendant outfit on, and she's now playing a character and she's speaking differently. She slows her speech, changes her tone, and just the way that her psychology goes from like a more innately upset character to like just this excitement. And there's this the way they evolve the psychology I love so much.
I like the how it just straight starts the film straight away from like that lecture where it's like I think the quote is the secret for harvesting from existence, the greatest fruitfulness and the greatest enjoyment is to live dangerously, and that really is just like foreshadowing to the what's going to eventually happen. Like him leaned down this path of like becoming the hitman, the Ron character, and kind of changing his personality around Madison. Like you said, I guess it is a bit easy for him, and it probably skips past that kind of progression to the end in the end scene where they skip forward in time to this like perfect scenario where you kind of balance the Ron and the Gary personality together, and he's in this like perfect relationship with Madison. I keep going back to the before trilogy, but again, it just kind of feels like links to that through Linklater, but it goes back to the relationships and that where like it almost feels like I think Jesse says to Celine at one point that she makes him like see himself differently, and I feel like he's kind of going to that again here, where like he almost associates himself as a different person with Madison throughout the whole film, and she kind of brings out that more confident side of Ron, or Gary starts to blend into Ron when they're together, and then eventually in the end where he's kind of like blended them into like this perfect version of himself. So I like all those like links, like previous Linklater that it kind of has, and just how you slowly see the progression of the two characters kind of blending in together. Yeah, I liked all the kind of different characters that you were saying that he has to play together, like the American Psycho references, the kind of Tilda Swinton character. I think all that stuff is really funny. Like the Russian, the hillbilly guy. It really is where he gets like really comedic. Like he kind of goes away from like kind of reality based, because like you said, it would be really hard to like kind of blend all those characters. And I know Glen Powell done a lot of research how to move your body and change, and there's a lot more like different stuff like changing his hair and makeup and stuff like that, because like the actual guy would do this in real life that he got inspiration from. He would actually change his personality and stuff for like depending on the client, but obviously he didn't go to this point where he would wear wigs and costumes and stuff like so in there just for the comedic moments in the movie. But I think those are really like good links to the actual real life kind of side that this is based on.
Yeah, and then like things like you talked about that quote in the beginning, like there's that talk with his ex-wife early on, and you could see like he feels like desperate, like you could tell she doesn't like have any, she says like he lacks any like passion in his life, and he just seems like she has no real interest in him. Like he kind of wants her back underneath the surface, it seems like. And like she's obviously intelligent too, and they talk about like the ability, like passion, and like, oh, to murder someone you have to really love someone. And it's like, oh, he's like has no passion in his life, and then he eventually gets to the point where he does love someone enough where he does actually murder someone. And Jasper says it before, he's like, I know you did it because you couldn't kill a thing. And then he ends up ironically being the one who kills him.
Yeah.
And just the kind of ideas about like this animal instinct passion that the film explores is in a comedic way too is very interesting. And I think then we really see like the film really lets us fall into that kind of honeymoon phase of the relationship in the second act, at least the first half of the second act, where there's like almost it gets a little kind of dazed and confused in that there's like very little conflict, and we really don't see a lot of the job for a while. It's just we're just so immersed in the romance, and it's really just making us enjoy the romance to where we don't want the secret to come out. And then then it gets to the point where basically it's like they're living in a fantasy, like they're living in a movie. Like she's in love with the
Hmm.
hitman character in a movie, just like a lot of other people. You have the good jazz music and all of that stuff. And then we have the scene where now their lives start bleeding into each other, where we see her ex-husband and we see Jasper at the club, or not the club, the ice cream place. And now it's just like the kind of trapped situation is growing. Like the trap, it goes from like almost no conflict to like from here on out, it's like high trapped conflict for the rest of the film. And it's just that interaction. We're just waiting for him to call him Gary. And like to his save, it doesn't. And like she thinks it's a game. She's like, "Oh, introduce me to your friend." It's like just like I said, the Hitchcock thing of like making us insiders, especially in that moment, makes it so suspenseful to where we have it's like, and you could tell like her ex-husband never stood up for her. And it's like the height of their relationship. Like he gave her what no other guy was able to give her. He stood up for her. The relationship's great. We get like the ultimate positive to now the ultimate negative. It all comes crashing down. And then now it's just like, when is the secret going to be exposed and kind of ruin all of this? And from there, then it's like it's just a ticking time bomb essentially from then on.
Hmm. Yeah, it's kind of that, like kind of like Hitchcock bomb under the table technique,
Yep.
really.
It really is, honestly.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, so then of course we get into, I think we cannot talk about the best scene of the film, which I think everyone consensus agrees is the best scene, which is the notes app scene where it's like in the moment the secret's out and like he becomes like when he's like Gary and the secret comes out, it's like he feels like so pathetic in that scene. His hair's like messed up now.
Hmm.
And then we go, it's like, oh, let's go right now. It's like, oh, I'll ride with you. And it's like any possible escape to this trap situation. It's like, how is he going to get out of this?
I mean, yeah, I think I said it's just such a good scene. The kind of like back and forth between the two. Um, Again, just yeah, like you were saying, like you kind of see that Gary side kind of blending into is kind of panicking and losing control. Because at this point they've really they're just kind of going with the flow. There's no like logic or um kind of his conscience, the logical side of Gary kind of fighting against him. But yeah, that's probably the best scene for kind of showing the acting between the two.
Yeah, it's so great. Like once again, like we're an insider that the conflict's so high at all times. Like it really brings the relationship back together because the conflict's so high. They have no time to argue about the fact that he was lying or anything. It's like, no, like we're in this shit. It's like double indemnity. It's like we're in this shit together now. It's like
Yeah.
we don't have time to hate each other or be petty or any of that stuff. It's like, no, like we got bigger shit to deal with. And of course, it's like we see him. He's essentially typing up the script, which is a very smart tactic in terms of like just anything in media. Like this should be a master class and like don't believe everything you see and hear because we see how like they like there's a quote like believe half of what you see and none of what you hear, and it's like everything that they're hearing is total bullshit. And it's really this scene, even though it's the dialogue scene, is not at all about the words. Like the words are all bullshit. We know it's all bullshit, and it's all about the expressions on their face and the way that
Mhm.
differs from what they're saying or the way it means something differently than you would think on the other end of the people listening, where it's like kind of the way she describes the guy at the club, and it's like we know she's talking about, they don't know she's talking about Gary, but we do. And how it goes from like this is another just standout from Arjona where she's like very nervous and like fumbling on her words in the beginning, but then when it gets to the point where they start talking about the stuff where they were with each other, it then it becomes more emotionally driven. She gets more confident, and then the insurance policy comes up. She fumbles a little bit, stretches her words a bit, like the tone of her voice changes, but she pulls it together. And then when they get to the grand finale where she kicks him out, that's when like now he's put the script down. Like now it's like act because he's like directing her and acting at the same time, essentially.
Yeah.
And then it becomes now it's okay, it's actor on actor again, and now the emotions heighten. And like once again, like the talk about passion, and it's like the way the conflict and the stakes reignites that passion in the relationship, rather than it possibly letting it get dull or bad feelings towards each other, or whatever. Like it re-excites that passion and excitement in the relationship, especially the way it kind of leaves off at the end. And I think it's just such a great scene because we're insiders to it. The stakes are so high at every moment. The slightest of slip ups would fuck up everything. And then, of course, just the performances, the emotion behind the performances, mostly through the facial acting and the tone in their voice.
I mean, it's also great the aspect of Jasper kind of knowing that they're lying, but we don't know if he's fully knows, we don't know if he's fully aware of how much they're lying. And then we also get like scene after where he did catch them out. But yeah, like him putting the input of like telling Gary what to like say and stuff. I think those are really good moments as well.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, I was curious because he was like, you want to go after the boyfriend, and he's like, nah, we're cool. And then I'm thinking like, okay, that's an out of character decision for him. Like, why?
Yeah.
Because you would think he'd want to like press that issue, and then you realize, oh no, it's because he wants the insurance money for himself. But yeah, it's such a great film. For me, I think it's easily one of the best of the year. Do you have anything else you wanted to add on Richard Linklater's Hitman?
Yeah, no, I think it definitely is one of the best of the year. It's a shame it didn't get a theatrical release because I think it would have maybe done well, got good word of mouth, a comedy. There's not a lot of summer blockbusters or anything this year, so I feel like something like this, where like has like high star power and it's really funny, and just a really fun movie. Honestly, would have done probably really well. But hopefully, hopefully at least does well on Netflix. From was it Friday it came out? Yeah, it's been out nearly a week, so it feels like it's doing well so far.
Yeah, I think this could have been a really good like date movie for the theaters. Like a lot of the theaters,
Yeah, for sure.
From people going on dates. Like it could have, I think, had a really good theater run. People think it was a Netflix movie from the start. Netflix actually acquired this. It wasn't like Netflix from its conception, but it was now it's a Netflix movie, and I guess it'll be a Netflix at home date movie rather than something that couples go out to see. But it's a film that I think is one of the best of the year.
I don't know. I hate the like kind of approach Netflix has now. Like The Killer basically got the same kind of release. Knives Out, they pulled that really early. They just kind of like hate money. They just feel like
Horrible.
Put them in for a couple of weeks, get money from like the theaters. I don't know why they don't just do that.
They're more concerned with ruining the theater industry to take over, to make streaming the dominant form of media. They care more about that than they do actually. Like, oh, you know what? If we release this theaters, we can make some money. Like they care so much more about.
It's free money. Just take it.
I got 3 in theater watches of this, so luckily I caught that. I probably would go another 1 or 2 more times if it was still playing, but I'm pretty sure it's about to leave. So I don't know if I'm going to get that, but hey, maybe it gets an Oscar nomination and I get to see it again next year. So
yeah, true.
Do you think this will get award nominations? Because it is a comedy and it is kind of like it doesn't feel like an Oscar movie, but it is Linklater.
Yeah, I feel like it might just maybe get lost in the kind of streaming world. Maybe Glen Powell, maybe. I don't know. There isn't like a lot of front runners now, but I feel that's probably going to change once it kind of enters award season and a lot of new films come out.
Yeah, if they don't nominate. Sorry, we're saying.
So I probably won't. I think Linklater has a good like history of getting screenplay nominations, doesn't he? It's usually just the screenplay.
Yeah, I think. If they don't nominate both the leads in this film, then that's going to be a major mistake. Because I think they're easy. So I'm guessing she's going to be under supporting, right? Not a co-lead.
Maybe, yeah, because she comes in like halfway through the movie.
I know. I thought about that. Because I was thinking like she's easily my front runner for best leading actress, and Rebecca Ferguson in Dune was easily my front runner for best supporting. If they're both in best supporting, that's such a tough choice. I don't even know who I would pick. Those are maybe the 2 best performances of the year, in my opinion. Like that would be tough.
Yeah, they're definitely both up there.
Yeah. So Linklater got nominated for Before Sunset and Before Midnight. Both got screenplay nominations, and then Boyhood got screenplay, director, and picture nominations.
Oh, yeah, Boyhood nearly won Best Picture.
Yep. It did not a ton of award nominations though for Linklater, truthfully. So I could see this totally kind of the Oscars neglecting this one, but hopefully at least it gets the respect it deserves in the performance categories.
Yeah, hopefully.
But all right, I think that wraps up everything on Richard Linklater's Hitman. Let us know what you think in the comments below. What was your favorite scene? I mean, I think I probably know what your favorite scene is, but like, subscribe, all that, and we'll be back next week with another great episode. Thank you for watching.